today I'm referring to what I think is one of the greatest of all the gospel passages. So I'm going to read what I know as the Great Commission in Matthew 28, verses 16 to 20. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age." As I said, we know it often as the Great Commission. Jesus sent his earliest followers on a mission into the world. Now, the world has many aspects to it. It's a word that we're familiar with in Christian circles. Sometimes people talk about it in a negative way. They say, I've left the world, in that kind of way that distances ourselves from the reality. But I think the world shouldn't just be seen in that sense. We're conscious that these disciples did eventually reach the wider world of the nations of that day. And people have been seeking to do that ever since. There is, however, when we talk about the call of God in our lives and the call to people in every age to go into the world of their day, I think there's been a broader understanding of world. And the world has always been changing, always getting bigger, always becoming more complex. Just think of the world of science. I've had on the show recently people of enormous ability in the world of science, whether it is in a lab or as astrophysicists, the many areas that are there. And certainly when I talk about vaccines in our day, that's certainly relevant at this moment, isn't it, in time? So we say to ourselves, the world of science, the world of music. Oh gosh, music in many, many forms. Now, Phil Pringle, who I spoke to just a few months ago, certainly understood music as one of those forms, though both for he and I, it's something we enjoy rather than practice. It's music that is such an expression, how it's been the doorway for Christian people down the years. Some of the greatest works of music ever written in that day and today still have their roots within the Christian community. And art, gosh, art in which we've looked at. And this marvellous picture that's here just by me that's been given by Phil to help the homeless is just one expression of how he's used his own artistic ability and skills to move other people. I think of Phil as being somebody who can actually tell a story as he completes a work of art. And I think that's really a marvellous way of communicating the gospel. Now, art exists in so many different ways, but it demands on the part of those of us participating the willingness to see. So when Jesus sent those first disciples out into the world to preach the gospel, to live the gospel, and to reveal the gospel to other people, it was to encompass every area of life. Now, I find that enormously encouraging when you're talking to young people or people who are particularly outside what we call the church and all that goes with that. For many of them, it's marvellous when they can see that it's possible to perceive the Christian faith through the everyday inspirations of their life and to see that can be true. Just think of the ways in which that message of Jesus was given to those disciples. We're told that some doubted, incidentally. Don't you think that's interesting? That even right at that stage, when they had been through resurrection and they had recognized, some still doubted when they gathered together. But very soon on that journey to Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit came upon the church, there would not just be a people who doubt. Many people put their trust in him. And I think that that's important to affirm that reality in everyday life. And that going out into all the world had many aspects to it. We're told quite clearly they were to go to make disciples of all nations. So it didn't have a limit to the geography that we're talking about here. Baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit. It was to include people into the community of faith so that they might belong as well as believe. And teaching them to observe everything command I've commanded you. Wonderful, really, that the teaching ministry is there right from the very beginning. And even in these forms we've just talked about, in science, music and art, there's a teaching element to all of that too, as it speaks and it communicates the deep message of the love of God. And then there's the verse that brings it all together at the end of the Great Commission. You can't miss this. You can't read it without a focus here. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. When all time is finished, when everything else has been wrapped up, God's presence in Jesus Christ through the Holy Spirit will always be with his people. And that's really the inspiration to go into all the world. You can go there because there's nothing that can happen to you that can stop you enjoying the blessing of God and the sense of his presence with us. There's nothing that can stop you doing good in this world when there are so many people who know the exact opposite, in poverty, hurt, and in so many ways. Go into all the world because surely he's with us to the very, very end of the age. And that's a great promise, especially in these days when there are many things in the world that we might be fearful of and concerned about the future. There's a real sense where God's presence makes a whole big difference to the way we see things as they are.